I'll go sector by sector, looking mainly at the natural resources sectors. We'll look at the current development picture, mainly at the investment situation, the climate outlook, and then conflict, vulnerability, and the environment. And then I will finish with hope on the horizon. Things aren't as bad as they always seem to be. The households of Tanzania are very, very strongly tied to their natural resources, whether it's land for agriculture, whether it's forest resources, fisheries resources, marine resources, wildlife, you name it. Failure for them to access those natural resources means failure in the household economies, and consequently failure also in the national economy. So basically supporting and maintaining the natural resource base is fundamental, but the reality is quite different. Tanzania has experienced very long-term and widespread both market and policy failures, leading to poor decisions, sometimes leading to decisions which are not based on sound information, which are not based on research. And even if they are based on sound information and research, the decision-making process seems to be problematic, largely resulting out of what I would say bad governance, corruption, and lack of transparency. And this is also rooted to Tanzania's history. For those of you who aren't very familiar, I'll let you know very quickly that when Tanzania became independent in the 60s, it was basically a socialist country. By the time it got to the 1990s, it transformed itself into a market economy, and now it sees itself as a capitalist country. Again, we see a contradiction in the sense that part of the leadership is wanting to apply capitalist market economies, and yet the mindset is rooted in socialism. And the young who are growing up within the market-driven capitalist economy don't fully understand or comprehend the challenges that are associated with it. So they don't see the difference between capitalist market orientation and outright theft and corruption. Major contradictions. There's a lot of overlap and a lot of dialogue cross-sectoring, and policies, even within IIED, sometimes you don't have the interdepartmental or whatever connectivity. And it's the same with the government ministries in Tanzania. Many years ago, when we were doing the first homegrown, home-driven national strategy for growth and poverty reduction, which IIED was actually part of, it had some research input into it. We have now gone into our second one. I was deeply frustrated because we were in a retreat like this with senior government officials in the natural resources sector, and we were painfully trying to explain how important the natural resources sector was for poverty reduction. And after 2 or 3 days, we thought the message was delivered. And to my disappointment, a representative from the wildlife division said, "Look, I'm very skilled at wildlife management. Poverty reduction is not my business." So in other words, he couldn't make the link between getting income and revenues from good management of tourism, wildlife hunting, and so on, and using those revenues to try to drive poverty out of people's lives. And that isn't manifested in that single department. It's almost across the board. So we have a vision that wants to take us out of poverty into modernization, into modern development. But it's not happening. We have strategies for poverty reduction, but it isn't happening. It isn't happening because we can't make the link, and we are not dedicated to the link, and we have failed to align our sectoral policies to those greater aspirations. I'll take a look at agriculture. Agriculture, like in most sub-Saharan African countries, places in the world is extremely important and becoming increasingly so important. Almost 80% of the population is engaged from small-scale agriculture to large-scale. Agriculture in Tanzania has been growing. Contribution to export has been growing, but its share of total exports has declined, mainly because of rapid expansion that we've seen in tourism and mining. At the moment, Tanzania is attempting to do a homegrown green revolution. In Kiswahili we call it kilimo kwanza. But looking very closely at it, it seems to be ad hoc, and it doesn't take into account an important dimension that IIED is working on, and that is climate change. It's talking about irrigating 7 million hectares, and I have no idea where they're going to get that water from. It's talking about irrigation. It's not talking about efficient irrigation. We're seeing sugarcane growing companies, both from within and outside Tanzania, continuing to use sprinklers, where we know that the efficiency of sprinklers is extremely low. And yet the agricultural policies are oblivious to that. Predictions regarding to climate change show that over the next 20 years, most of central and southern Tanzania will become water scarce areas. And yet when we look at this homegrown green revolution, there's absolutely no mention, no concern about that. And already what we're beginning to see as a result of this so-called green revolution is talking, again, as Sid pointed out, very central facet there, and that is land. What is basically happening is that the landed poor are now being transformed into landless poor. And that is a recipe for disaster. Because then they have no other option. They will go into every type of extraction activities in the natural resources sector that we regard as illegal. So they will eventually also become criminalized.